hybrid casual has emerged as the top genre in gaming. I think AppLovin is the reason why AdTech has suddenly become very interesting again, to be honest, because of the stock price surge. I think, interestingly, I feel AI has always existed in AdTech. Let's say a startup, right? You're basically all the time firefighting, but you also have control over solving those problems.
And welcome to this new episode of Rising Through the Ranks podcast. I know it's been long since we last posted a video, but this is a new season of our podcast series. So today we have Mr. Ashish Agarwal, who left his job at Google and co-founded AppBroda, which is a gaming ad tech company. So in this episode, we talk about his journey while at Google or co-founding AppBroda. Then we also talk about the gaming ad tech space, the present of it, the future of it, and then we also talk about how AI is affecting it and everything around that. So do tune in for the entire episode and let us know your opinions in the comment section below.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Rising to the Ranks podcast. And today we are going to be talking about AdTech with the co-founder of AppBroda, Ashish Agarwal. Hello, Ashish. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hello. Could you first tell us more about yourself and your journey?
Yeah, sure. So I've spent the last 13 years working in content, in ad tech, and in gaming. I started my career with Google in India. That's how I got my feet wet into the world of ad tech and ads. And it's been a really, really interesting journey. I had never thought I would build my career in ad tech. With most people, I think in ad tech happens to them and not the other way around, because very few people really know about what ad tech is, although it's sort of the industry that powers the internet, I would say, especially in the last 15 years. So I spent a considerable time at Google. I also worked in a startup called Roposo, which was a UGC startup, kind of like the TikTok of India, which got sold to another ad network called InMobi Glance. And then I came back to Google actually in 2017. And this time I spent 6 years on the supply side, which is basically working with app, game, and website publishers, whose core business is either getting monetized via ads or via in-app purchases and subscriptions, right? So I had two stints, one in what is known as Google's display network, better known as AdMob, and the second stint was in Google Play partnerships. And the last 3 years, I've joined as co-founder and chief business officer at AppBroda. AppBroda is essentially what is known in our ecosystem as a SSP, or a supply side partner. What we think of it as a marketplace where we are partnered with advertisers and agencies. We get ads from them and we pass them on to mobile game publishers. So we basically are plugged into mobile game publishers today. We work with 1,300 unique mobile games as of today. And we're passing on these ads to them from various advertisers. So we're a marketplace sort of model where we make a revenue share between the two parties.
Right, got it. Also, how did you meet your co-founders and what was the starting journey for AppBroda?
Yeah, it was very interesting, man. So I was actually in Google, and Sid, who's the founder and CEO, I met him when he was working in another ad tech company. So my role in Google was to partner with people, third-party vendors, and other people who are building SaaS businesses in the ad tech space in India. And very few of those existed when I was there in 2017 to 20. And Sid was part of one. And I met him there, and they were trying to be a Google partner. Eventually, they became a Google partner, and I was their account manager, right? So I used to meet Sid as a professional relationship. And then when I moved to Google Play and he started AppBroda, we stayed in touch. We always wanted to know what's happening, what's going on in the industry. And look, Google obviously is like the big daddy in this space, so it was interesting for them also to know what's happening with Google, right? So we stayed in touch just to kind of like see what the other person is doing. And at some point, I was like, I want to go to the other side, move from the corporate structure to the startup structure. And I think like two things were clear to me, that I want to do it with someone that I know pretty well, and I am excited about the complementary skill set that I can do together. And that person for me was Sid, also because after speaking for 6-8 months, just as sort of friends, you kind of build an understanding about the person's thought process. So that was how I joined. And Sid's AppBroda journey started a year before mine. And I would like to say it was because of my recommendation that he started. We identified like a market gap, and I think he he was the entrepreneurial guy who took that first leap of faith and said, "Yeah, I'm going to do it," and he did it. And then I saw, okay, this guy's done it. Now I should also, take leap of faith. So that's how my interaction with Sid happened, 2018, 2019 time, and then he started in 2020, 21, and then I followed him into that journey.
And Ashish, you talked about the market gap. So maybe can you break down for us what the gaming value chain looks and where AdTech sits there, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's very simpler, it's sort of similar to the manufacturing supply chain, actually, interestingly, right?
Okay.
So I'll start with where the games are made. Games are actually not made by a lot of the people that we think make games. So we read about these big brands who are making games, right? But actually, they're not making it, they're buying games. So I'll draw an analogy from the book publishing model. So let's say a person in China or India or Eastern Europe, these are the gaming hubs where the developer sits, right? They make 40, 50 games a year, especially in the hyper casual segment, like board games, runner games, action games. They then sell this game as a prototype or in a little bit advanced avatar to a game publisher. So think of someone like a Rolig, a Mini Clip, a Zynga. These are game publishers. They're sitting in typically tier one Western markets. They are hunting for game developers all over the world, saying who has built a really good game, right? And they have a very, very clear playbook that your prototype game has to meet so and so numerical metrics. So, for example, your cost per install on the game in USA has to be 60 cents or lower. Your retention on the seventh day has to be 7% or higher. Right? So they have a very clear playbook which they build over time, saying, okay, which game is likelier to work, and I will only publish that. So very similar to the way manufacturing of books work.
Yeah.
There are these large companies who have piles of cash and resources, and there are a bunch of small developers who have the ability to churn out games. Right. So I would say maybe there are few 100,000 developers globally selling their games to maybe 300 or 400 companies in the world. So the game publishing ecosystem is concentrated. The game development ecosystem is fragmented, right? So that's the first part. You build a game, you ship it to this publisher. Typically, the going rate in the market today is between $2,500 to $5,000 for a prototype plan. Saying I've just built a concept level game, maybe I've built a few levels. I show my game to the publisher, and he will say, okay, I'm going to pay you $3,000. Give me the game.
Okay.
If he decides to publish the game, then they enter a revenue share or profit share agreement. Hey, I'm going to scale your game. I'm going to spend the money on user acquisition. I will manage everything. And you will just get profits. And maybe from time to time, I will ask you to increase the levels or the gameplay. So let's take a hypothetical example that this game that I entered with in a revenue share agreement scaled to $10 million a year. The publisher will make maybe 90% of the revenue, and the developer will make 10% of the revenue. The developers maybe taking home $30,000-$40,000 a year, and the publisher is taking home maybe $1 million a year, right? So that's sort of the supply chain in that aspect. Now, so the game is manufactured by developer, sold to publisher. The publisher then leverages user acquisition channels like Google, like Apple, like Meta, like AppLovin to distribute the game to billions of users today across the internet, right? And the last sort of piece is how do you actually monetize the game? Boulder that is there, and that's where sort of like AdTech comes in. So one place is AdTech comes in user acquisition. The second place is in monetization. Right? So a lot of the games that all of us play today on mobile, which are typically known as hyper casual games, like think of Ludo King, they are monetized via ads, which are served from ad networks. So those are sort of the 4 or 5 key stakeholders in the journey. So just to summarize, you have a developer, you have a publisher, you have a user acquisition channel where you have AdTech playing, and then again you have the monetization channels where again AdTech is playing a part.
So Ashish, so will the developer be using the AdTech platform, or is it the publisher that uses the AdTech platform?
It's the publisher.
Okay.
So the developer is only responsible for the manufacturing of the game and the improvement of the product.
Okay, so at AppBroda you work with developers or?
We work with publishers.
Okay.
Right, because the scale is crazy. They're the ones using the ad tech.
Yeah.
So we are an ad tech player. So we end up working with the 400 to 500 publishers that I mentioned, who are like really large scale, making hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue a year.
And Indian publishers also do. You mentioned there are global concentrated players. Any Indian publishers that are exciting? Uh,
So I think India, from a developer lens, is very exciting.
yeah.
There are lots of Indian developers um, fragmented across places like Gujarat, places like Rajasthan, Bangalore, of course. Chennai is coming up as a hub. Um, but there are not many Indian publishers. I think maybe like Nazara in recent 12 to 24 months has been active in M&A, acquiring games globally. So they're sort of like a publisher from India. On the other hand, Play Simple would be classified as a studio, where they are building games in-house and they're scaling them themselves, right?
For Zynga, right? Yeah.
Play Simple is independent. They're sort of an independent gaming studio, as is, let's say, a Moonfrog or a Gameberry Labs or a Ludo King Game Shin. These are standalone studios that have scaled to a large extent. They have not sold or bought games; they've built in-house games.
Got it.
Also, where do you see the AdTech and gaming industry in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a shock for me because when I was in Google, we had this worldview that Google and Meta type companies will continue to dominate ad tech. Having come on this side and the way things have also moved in the last 24 months, I think I'm sort of challenging that worldview and saying that ad tech in gaming is going to get and already is uh, fragmented in the sense it has maybe 6 players who are relevant today. It's no longer this like duopoly. It's very much the market share is very much split amongst like 5 or 6 players, and I think there's actually room for more. And it's better for the ecosystem if there are more players. It's better for the end publisher because he doesn't need to depend only on one ad network or one ad tech player, right? And I think it's both on user acquisition side as well as monetization side. So to answer your question, in 5 years, one of the things we will see is maybe that a game developer has 7 or 8 choices of network on where to acquire a user and where to monetize a user, right? The second is I do think that there's a concept in our industry called eCPM, which is essentially the price attributed to an ad or a user who's seeing the ad. There's been a long talk about CPMs growing, but it hasn't really happened in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
In the next 5 years, CPMs almost have to grow for publishers to thrive. Today, publishers are struggling because of low CPMs. So if this industry has to exist, which everything suggests it will, CPMs will be growing in the next 5 years, right? Especially in markets like India and other emerging markets.
And Ashish, that's the question we had. Traditionally, it's been said that India is a very hard market because these are low and ads are not a good monetization level for the Indian audience. So, do you think that will change? Where do you see the IAP ad share going ahead in the Indian market?
Yeah, so I think there are 2 types of gaming studios. One is sort of like the ones who build mid-core to high-end games, like PUBG, Garena, Free Fire, etc. Those studios always rely on in-app purchases or micro-transactions, right? I think that's growing really fast, even in India, where people are paying for different things on PUBG, and I think that'll just accelerate because typically games are played by 18 to 25-year-olds right now. Imagine the same people growing up and having disposable income and then saying, I still want to play the game. And I still am used to playing mobile games. Now they can purchase it also because they have the spending power. So I think that's going to dramatically grow. On ads, the same thing will happen. Today, games are largely hyper-casual games, are largely played by younger folks, right? And a lot of women in the middle age segment, right? Now, again, the same concept of eCPM applies that if you have more disposable income, your CPMs will grow. So I think we've seen that not just in gaming, across the digital economy, there is a tailwind on people spending on the internet for media entertainment, for gaming, for other kinds of content, which, like you said, Indians were not sort of paying for. It's happening at a rapid pace. The volume and the number of people paying is still maybe not as much as people would like, but there's a huge tailwind. So in maybe in 5 years, India will be the #1 country in terms of number of transactions. The value will obviously be lower, but it's sort of the next 5 to 10 years is going to be like really, really interesting for both IAP and for ads.
And Ashish, one more question just around the gaming industry. So yes, I think the gaming industry, for example, competes with other industries for attention and eyeballs,
Yeah.
and ads are a way to monetize eyeballs, right? Do you think, uh, like, where is it going? Hyper casual is what we are seeing these days, where
Hmm.
very small loops, very small engagement loops, and ads in between them. Uh, do you think hyper casual and casual are the next thing, and are they going to take the entire mammoth share of gaming moving ahead, or like how do you look at that?
So currently, hybrid casual has emerged as the top genre in gaming.
And
To
what
bet.
is that? Like,
Hybrid casual is basically a combination of hyper casual and casual,
okay.
where basically the you're taking the same sort of meta or like the same concepts of hyper casual, but in having much deeper gameplay, much deeper loops, and making more richer UX content levels, more richer characters, where the person's time spent on the same concept, which got him excited to download the game, he's spending more time on it. So what happens in hyper casual, it's like an impulse purchase. You see an ad,
Yeah.
you download the game, you play it for a few sessions, and then you forget about it. In hybrid casual, the same impulse is there, but then you play a longer game because the game design is sort of designed to make you keep playing. Hybrid casual is the new genre that globally people are betting on.
Okay.
And in fact, I would say this is going to emerge as the new genre for at least the next 3 years. Hyper casual is sort of stabilized and not being bet on as much. Casual and hybrid casual is being bet on much more in the next 24 to 36 months.
And then Ashish, at AppBroda, then how do you think about such a dynamic changing industry?
Yeah.
How do you change your strategy? And as a publisher, for example, what should I? Two questions. So basically, as a publisher, what am I thinking when I'm looking at AppBroda? How am I
Right.
thinking of using it? And also, how do you think about these changing industries? Maybe separate questions, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think one of the common things in AdTech is that AdTech, the way AdTech works, it works completely on the user data level, not so much on the content data level. It is important, but currently the way AdTech is structured as an infrastructure, it is dependent on who is playing the game or watching the news article, rather than what is the game or what is the news article.
Very interesting.
Mix,
Okay.
but the relevance is much more on the user. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I am in market for my next vacation. Now, whether I'm reading Times of India, whether I'm playing Ludo King, or whether I'm playing PUBG, I will see a travel ad.
Got it.
The advertiser figures out Ashish wants to buy a flight ticket.
Right.
We will not care what content I am playing. It is based on what does Ashish want and is in market to pay for. Right. So to answer your question, for AppBroda as a ad tech player who's a marketplace for ads, it does not matter what content the user shifts to hyper to hybrid or to a AAA type of title. It only depends what can we identify what the user wants to buy immediately.
Right. Also, if we see there is AppLovin, which is a very big company today.
Right.
What makes them so successful?
Yeah. I think AppLovin is the reason why AdTech has suddenly become very interesting again, to be honest, because of the stock price surge.
Yeah.
I think to answer your question, what makes them successful is their speed of execution. They came into an industry which, like I said, like my own worldview was that it's dominated by incumbents, Google and Meta and so on. Will there be a third meaningful player? Obviously, they've validated that there is room for a third and fourth meaningful player, right? What makes them so successful is that they had a very clear vision, I think, in how to address this incumbent industry. And their playbook was, because the incumbents are probably a little too comfortable, we'll be able to enter and make our mark, right? So two things that they've done really well from my understanding. Their machine learning and data capabilities are really, really gold standard, right? So in AdTech, the person who wins is the person who has better first-party data combined with the better machine learning built on that first-party data. Because then you can tell an advertiser that Ashish is in market for X and not Y. And Ashish is worth Y dollars and not Z dollars. Because it's an auction-based system.
Right.
The person who can do that on paper will win every time. That was AppLovin's sort of secret sauce number A. Arguably, obviously, Google and Meta also have this.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the more important thing was the speed at which they attacked the supply side of the ecosystem, which is the publishers.
Hmm.
Trying to acquire inventory in this space is very, very hard. But AppLovin was able to do it really, really well because they had confidence that if we are able to get supply, our machine learning is so good that we will be able to get advertisers to pay a higher price for show ads, right?
Right.
I think that conviction can only come from conviction in your product and conviction in your speed of execution. So the heart of it, whoever I speak to in the industry, the only reason AppLovin has succeeded is sort of these two pillars that they build the company.
So Ashish, is AppLovin the same as AppBroda? Do you guys do the same thing, or?
Yeah. So AppLovin is sort of does the end-to-end infrastructure in AdTech. So
Okay.
there is a DSP, which is a demand side platform,
Hmm.
works with advertisers, saying, hey, give me your budget, tell me your campaign, so on. And then there is something called a mediation platform, which is think of it like a judge or jury who decides between various ad networks whose ad do I show.
Correct.
And then there's something called an SSP, which is a supply side platform, which is connected into publishers' inventory and is the final pipe that connects the DSP to the SSP to the inventory.
Right.
We are an SSP. AppLovin is everything.
Also, Ashish, like as you mentioned, there are two parts to it. One is the first party data, second is the ML model.
Right.
So when we naturally think about it, like for the first party data, Google and Meta have a clear advantage
Right.
over every other player.
Yeah.
So how do players like AppBroda, AppLovin uh, mitigate that advantage and use the first party data to gauge the user's interest?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the way they've done it, because we don't do it, they essentially said we'll create a circular ecosystem of gaming to gaming. So they had a very hyper focus on gaming, solving the gaming ad tech problem, right? So they went to gaming publishers and said, put my code or SDK. Started gathering the first party data from there. And they went to gaming advertisers and said, hey guys, I know a lot about gamers in other games. I can show your ad about your new game to them. Okay. We first started with the circular economy, which is huge, right? Because gaming is like maybe 1 or 2 billion people play games on mobile. So they said, guys, this is a big enough economy, right? So they got all the supply in gaming and they went to advertisers in gaming and said, guys, it's pretty simple. Ashish loves gaming. You can show him a gaming ad. So first party data is, I would say there are very innovative ways to get it.
Yeah.
This is how they did it. But you have other ways. For example, you can tie up with data brokerages. You can tie up with partners. Like think about Q-commerce. Today, you can tie up with Q-commerce and get access to their shopper data.
Yeah.
You can really make a very meaningful ad tech business out of that. Whether they will do it or not is a different question. But it's an opportunity even for Q-commerce to say, hey, I am sitting on a treasure trove of data like today's Zepto has Jarvis, which is in-house ad tech platform.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, we might see Jarvis being leveraged for a new business vertical in Zepto where they show ads outside on a game.
Right.
The ads are powered through Jarvis.
So Ashish, what I'm getting from is that worldview that these centralized large players is being disrupted by verticalized players who are focused on some sort of data that they have acquired, and this is the game they're playing. That is very interesting, actually.
Yeah, I think this is something sort of like new that's happened in ad tech. For a while, it wasn't happening, or it was happening in stealth, behind the scenes at a smaller scale. And sort of it's come to light, like you rightly said, it's happening in verticals. That's a very good point. It's happening in commerce, happening in gaming. We saw it back in the day when web was hot. It was happening on news.
Yeah.
So there were other people who sort of came in and said, okay, why is Google AdSense the only ad network? There should be other ad networks, right? So they went after like the content on food blogger side, on news side. And I think we're seeing this playbook now on gaming, in Q-commerce, e-commerce. Who knows what's next? There probably will be something else as well.
Yeah, and with so many disruptions happening, I think one thing we definitely have to talk about is AI, and it looks like it's going to be the next big thing across industries. How do you think it will affect ad tech?
Yeah, I think interestingly, I feel AI has always existed in ad tech.
Okay.
In a sense that like maybe it was called machine learning and like really advanced machine learning. But if I think about the predictive nature of showing an ad, it's gotten like exponentially better over the last 15 years, right? Like earlier it used to be, oh, you're reading sports content, let me show you a sports ad. It was that basic logic.
Okay.
But as data became sort of like much more available to Google and Meta and all the other ad networks, the kind of machine learning algorithms that they have built, kind of variables that they have incorporated, like they've incorporated things like climate change into these variables,
Wow.
into these machines. Right? So it's bizarre to think about, but like they're already very advanced or were advanced before AI became a buzzword, in my opinion. Because to show an ad which gets a user interested is very, very hard, right? I think almost if you think about users, people used to say ads are annoying. I don't think today people feel ads are that annoying because the content has become much more relevant to them on an ad.
Interestingly, Ashish, I will give you one thing that I feel personally.
Yeah.
I feel I don't see ads only. Like even let's say I scroll through one day and maybe I've seen many ads. So for example, now that I'm thinking about it, I saw one ad that was relevant to a search that I had done, but they don't
Right.
feel like ads anymore. Maybe that is they are so short, do the work and next thing happens. So
I think
yeah,
two things will happen with
yeah.
AI. You will see the predictive nature of the ad you see
Hmm.
getting way better,
Hmm.
coupled with which the content, which is the creative of the ad, will get extremely better because there's so many AI tools today that are working on reducing the cost of creating that creative and
Okay.
enhancing the quality of the creative itself.
Hmm.
So ads, like you rightly said, will become more like another content piece
Hmm.
between your Instagram scrolls or between your, YouTube shorts or wherever you're playing a game.
Yeah.
So the click-through rates will be higher,
Right.
right? Advertisers are going to see a lot more people clicking their ads because of AI. I also think we'll see newer ad formats because of AI, which we
Okay.
haven't seen in a while. We used to the banner ads and video ads and all of that. But I think with AI, there is room for creating more engaging ad formats for a user, where you can, instead of having to maybe leave the game and go to the website, maybe there's a world where you use AI to engage with the ad as content and complete some action which the advertiser wants on the ad itself, which
So
was not possible earlier.
is the ad like a game or for
More like
in the
use mini
game?
games in ads.
Today you already have ads which are like called playable ads, where you can
Okay.
play the game for like 30
Okay.
seconds and get experience. But I think with AI, you can extend this same sort of behavior to many more verticals, many more formats. There will be probably a format in the future which will be AI based. So the
Very
under the hood
interesting.
stuff is already happening, which is like relevance, what ad do I show you, at what price do I show you. Content is going to get better in terms of how should the ad look, which is also going to be AI based. I also think there'll be future where there'll be an AI format of an ad. I don't know what that is, but I'm pretty sure there will be an ad which says, okay, we are much more engaging, and there's under the hood AI that's generating that.
Interesting.
Okay. Also, one more thing, I have recently started noticing that ads using AI or any analytics tool have become highly hyper personalized. Like if I
Yeah.
see my Swiggy notifications, they are extremely curated for what I have on a Friday.
Right.
So, how do you see hyper personalization of ads in gaming industry or in general in this ad tech industry?
Yeah, I think it ties back to the AI part, right? The machine learning part, right? Like today, I think all these ad networks know way too much about all of us than we can even imagine.
Okay.
And imagine data is one thing, but imagine really smart machine learning folks building predictive models on top of that raw data, right? Like I said, like think of the bizarre kind of variables that these ad networks have already baked into their machine, like climate change.
Yeah.
Right.
So in terms of hyper personalization, we already see nowadays people complaining, hey, a product I saw on Flipkart or some e-commerce site is priced differently on iOS and Android. This has been like a common, I've seen this on
Yeah.
like many people
Yeah.
complain, right? So this is an example of hyper personalization. It's debatable whether it's wrong or right. I don't have a point of view there, but this is an example of hyper personalization, right? So today on Friday night or Saturday morning, your cravings, Swiggy will know or Zomato will know that this guy typically orders this kind of stuff, but maybe now his friend has come because they can also figure that out through
Wow.
data that they have. And so now we should give him a discount on a group order,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's there today, right? Like we all as users say, yeah, I just said this. I just saw an ad on Instagram. Like this is something people do say at parties, right? Like I just spoke about this to you. How did I see this ad? So I think it's already there in our life. We just don't like. Maybe some people are like okay with it. I think people are okay with it.
Right.
People are like anti it, and the people are like yeah, privacy hona chahiye, privacy hona chahiye. Uh, but it's already like out there.
Yeah.
But speaking about privacy, like recently, like I think a year or two back, Apple
Right.
closing its gates for privacy, which affected the ad market, or abhi EU taking harsh steps on
Yeah.
the ad industry. Do you think this will grow as a trend even in countries like India, US, and will it hamper the growth of ad tech?
Yeah, I think it will grow in countries, especially like EU. And I think even to some extent, platforms will be forced to, become more and more walled gardens. But it might be a scenario where you belong to one walled garden or the other. So, for example, a TikTok or an Instagram is called a walled garden, where you are okay opting into data sharing with
Instagram.
Instagram or TikTok. You opted into that, right? You're sharing your life, you're posting content. They will show you really rich ads. The people who will suffer in that are third-party ad networks who don't have their own walled garden.
Right.
Okay.
So imagine like a Google search will say, guys, you opted into search. I am allowed to then use that data to show you, and that's hard to argue. That's not, breaching privacy. But third-party networks who are relying completely on this data sharing will get impacted. Will it happen? I think it's really hard to say. Is it growing? Yes. But to be honest, the pace of regulation is way slower than the pace of data collection right now. So we might sit in a world where when it comes, 6 billion people ka data is already out there.
Yeah.
So will it make sense at that point? Might be a regulation, but may not be an
Yeah.
effective regulation.
Yeah, like this data seems to be the new oil. Everyone wants to have their own silo of data.
Yeah. I think everything you see today, like especially in e-commerce, like Amazon ads, Flipkart ads, Zepto ads, they're the ones driving a lot of profit for these companies as well.
And Ashish, on like an individual level now, we've talked about AdTech a lot, I think. One thing is, for example, you also left your job at Google
Right.
to do this startup.
Right.
And you have had your journey now. So, what is the most rewarding thing for you? And anybody who's looking to start up in India today, in any
Yeah.
kind of domain, what
Yeah.
would you say that comes out of your journey, and what would you recommend to them?
Yeah, I think like Google and big corporations are a great journey if you want to sort of have like sort of be in coast mode where you have a predictive income, you have a predictive career to a large extent. It's a great journey. It couldn't be better. Large MNCs, etc. I think if you want to have control over your work and decision-making powers, then it is hard to do it in such a large company or companies that exist today because you're not the decision maker. My realization was that even in very large companies, it's just a handful of people, like maybe 10 or 15 people, who are actually making the decisions that impact my work or the business. And I think that for me was the biggest shift plus exciting thing, which I didn't think about so much when I left. It was a frustration that existed when I was in any of these jobs that, hey, I don't have much control over my work. There are some opportunities I can see which we should be capitalizing on or some challenges we should be solving better. But I realized over time that I couldn't do it myself. Whereas in, let's say, a startup, right, you're basically all the time firefighting, but you also have control over solving those problems, right? And somewhere that satisfaction of problem solving has been the most rewarding part of this journey.
Very
Right? All these problem scales are very small compared to like, the big companies where the problem scale is like hundreds of millions of dollars. But for me, it was that, hey, I'm not solving it. It's not above me who's telling me, this is how we're going to solve it, and I'm executing some part of it. But in, let's say, in AppBroda, we might be solving problems worth millions of dollars. But at least I'm having a point of view along with the team. Everyone has a point of view here. All 20 of us have a point of view on how to solve the problem. And everyone feels like they are contributing to the solution or the failure of that solution that we did. And I feel the people who work here in startups, that is sort of very exciting for them more than the money and all. Personally, I feel like more than money and everything, it becomes normalized. But the satisfaction of waking up and solving a new problem every day and there is a new problem every day in startups,
Okay.
is sort of the driving force which keeps you working 24/7.
That is so interesting. Yeah. Ashish, I think one just around startups. I've been watching Shark Tank these days. India is, many new founders are coming in. Do you
Right.
think so? Did you have any like before starting up? I think especially for any of us who haven't done that, there is
Hmm.
this fear कि ये तो 99% तो fail ही होता है.
Right, right,
And
right.
like, did you have that fear, and has that opinion changed?
So I
As you
think
said,
it's
you have
very
more.
much true. It's
Huh?
very much true. It's very, very,
Okay.
very true. And
Yeah.
even today, you can feel like you're gonna fail. And I think even if you reach $100 million ARR,
Yeah.
you feel like you can fail.
Oh shit.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not that I've met people who raise 50 million and people who are at 100 million, and everyone still feels today that they can fail.
Hmm.
So I think the survival thing is still a very, very reality that everyone should sort of go into. I feel the mistake I made when I first started up, which was 2015. I didn't stay in the game long enough.
Hmm.
At the first sort of failure or signs of failure, we kind of shut our startup instead of staying 6 years or 5 years.
Okay.
My only learning would be stay 5 years.
Hmm.
If you can survive, most people will have dropped out of the race that you are in for the same addressable market. In year one, year two, year three, you'll be the last 5% of runners, right? If you have that kind of appetite to just keep running in a large addressable market, right? So first learning was pick a market which is large.
Yeah.
Don't pick a very small market. Maybe you're doing something small in that large market, but pick a large market because you're someone who's intelligent and someone who's hustling. If you pick a very small market, your opportunity to run will not be enough because there isn't enough opportunity to run. But if you pick a large enough market and you are in it for 5 years, you will figure it out.
कुछ ना कुछ you will
कुछ
find.
हो जाएगा.
Yeah.
This was my one failure in 2015. I was in a very large market, but I didn't stay 5 years. I stayed 20 months. It's just not sufficient.
Yeah.
This time when I met Sid, I was like, yeah, whatever happens, I'll stay in AdTech for 5 years at
5 years.
least.
Hmm.
Let's see what happens. That's sort of the only thing that I learned from 2015 versus 2022
Yeah.
when I made the jump this time. So anyone who's young and thinking of starting up, I think there's always a risk that yeah, my friends are earning so much in VCs and MNCs and etc. I think that's really hard because nowadays salaries are so high.
Correct.
It's really hard to give up that lifestyle here at 25. People are traveling to here and there, all of that. That's something that I would really think about. Like, are you okay for 5 years not being that person?
Correct.
Right? It doesn't mean go and sleep in like five people sleeping in one room. I think those are extreme images also. Like it's not like we don't have lives. Like we go play sports, we live our lives, we get married, we have kids, right? I think sometimes people think it's either like going to be really sucky,
Yeah.
where like living in like almost poverty, or it's going to be really amazing.
Yeah.
I don't agree to this concept because I think nowadays you're also seeing a lot of bootstrap startups.
Correct.
And bootstrap startups make amazing profits for everyone in the company, right? So there is no like binary worldview कि यार मुझे completely सब कुछ materialistic छोड़ना पड़ेगा. And there's no worldview कि I'll be living on a yacht. You just there's so much in the middle. So I think a lot of people see these images and they get scared कि यार am I completely sacrificing my life? No, I think you're probably sacrificing parts of your life, but those 5 years you have to do it for sure. 5 years for sure. And in those 5 years, I would break it down and say if you're starting up today and you have an idea, try and find distribution. If you don't find distribution, see an idea where you can find some level of distribution. You can 5 customers you can sell to, 10 customers you can sell to. In the first 9 to 10 months, if you're not getting PMF, revisit the idea, speak to people, speak to those customers, see what else you can do in the same space.
Yeah.
Right? So break it down into like the 5 year. Don't do 5 years of one idea.
Correct.
Do 5 years of one TAM maybe, but not the same idea. So I think this is sort of the two things that I have learned. One is like just stay 5 years and pick a addressable market that is very large. It doesn't have to be a passion market or anything like that. Just like you logically feel like yeah, this market so it's going to grow. Like I feel AdTech is going to grow in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like publishers are going to grow, everyone's going to make more money. So I'm convinced about the dynamics of the market. And I know it's like hundreds of billions of dollars that is there to be spent. Right? Now, my challenge is how do I figure out something within this very large space in the next 5 minutes.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah. Ashish, thank you so much. This was actually very, very insightful. I think
Yeah.
anybody who is looking to understand AdTech, and in fact the last pieces of advice you gave about how to start up in India today would be very useful for young people like us. So thank you so much.
No, thank you so much,
Great to
guys. It
have
was
you on the
really fun
podcast.
talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching the podcast till the end.
If you have any questions or doubts for the guest, please let us know in the comments.
एंड इफ यू थिंक कि कोई क्वेश्चन बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है डू लेट अस नो ताकि वी कैन फोकस मोर ऑन द एस्पेक्ट नेक्स्ट टाइम
और आप लोग थैंक यू मत कहिए, इंस्टेड 3 लोगों से शेयर करिए और उन तीनों से कहना कि और 3 लोगों से शेयर करें, दुनिया बदल जाएगी।